Let's talk about something a lot of people, especially women, have been taught to feel guilty for: protecting their peace. We're told to be understanding, to compromise, to keep things smooth, to avoid hurting anyone's feelings, especially his. But what happens when keeping him comfortable means you're constantly uncomfortable? When protecting his ego means sacrificing your own well-being, energy, and self-respect? Here's the hard truth. Some people will only love you as long as you're easy to manage, as long as you don't set boundaries, as long as you stay small enough to fit their expectations. But the moment you choose peace over drama, clarity over chaos, and truth over approval, that's when their ego gets bruised. And you know what? Neri? Because your peace is not a luxury. It's not a favor you give yourself when everything's going well. It's the foundation of a life worth living. Today I want to show you why protecting your peace is never selfish, even when it makes someone else uncomfortable, and especially when it challenges their ego, because if your peace threatens them, you're not losing a good man, you're losing the illusion of one. When you decide to set a boundary, especially in a relationship where someone has gotten used to having access to you on their terms, it often doesn't go over quietly. Maybe you say, "I need space," or "that doesn't work for me anymore," or you finally stop answering texts that only come at midnight. Suddenly, you're the villain. You're cold, difficult, not the same. But the truth is, you're not being any of those things. You're just finally protecting your peace. And here's the reality most people don't say out loud. You are not responsible for how he handles that. A man who respects you will respect your boundaries, period. He may not always agree with them, and he might not even understand them right away, but he won't try to guilt trip you, manipulate you, or make you feel like you're wrong for needing them. If someone's ego gets bruised because you decided to take care of your emotional health, that's not your cue to bend over backward. That's your cue to lean in even harder to your standards. Because if the only version of you he can handle is the one who sacrifices her needs, then he never truly respected you in the first place. He just enjoyed the convenience of your silence. It's a strange kind of emotional conditioning we go through. We're taught to smooth things over, to avoid conflict, to phrase everything gently so no one feels uncomfortable. But boundaries are not about comfort. They're about clarity. You're saying, this is what I need in order to stay grounded, to stay healthy, to stay sane. And the right person, someone emotionally mature and secure, won't make that about them. They'll understand that your peace benefits the relationship too. Because when you're calm and aligned, you show up better, you communicate better, you love better. But some people will make your boundaries feel like a personal attack because they were benefiting from your lack of them. And when that happens, guilt creeps in. You start to wonder if you're being too harsh, too distant, too guarded. Let me say it clearly, you're not. You're just no longer available for emotional chaos. That's not cold, that's called self-respect. And if that makes someone uncomfortable, let it. Don't let their wounded pride become your problem to fix. People with fragile egos often confuse boundaries with rejection. They see your no as a threat, not as a healthy filter. That's because they've grown used to being prioritized over your peace. They were counting on your need for connection to outweigh your need for self-respect. So the moment you say, "I'm not okay with that," it throws them off. But that discomfort is theirs to unpack, not yours to carry. What's powerful is realizing you don't owe anyone a softened version of your truth just to keep them from reacting badly. You don't have to pre-approve your boundaries through their ego. You can say what you need, walk away if it's not respected, and hold your ground even if it makes them uncomfortable. Because at the end of the day, your peace isn't up for debate. It's not something you put on pause to make someone else feel secure. It's something you protect fiercely because no relationship is worth losing yourself for. So the next time you feel tempted to apologize for needing space, for pulling back, for raising your standards, don't. The right person won't ask you to trade your peace for their comfort. And the wrong person? Let their ego break. That's not your responsibility. Your only job is to honor what keeps you whole. There's a big difference between someone loving you and someone liking how easily they can manage you. A man who only shows up when you're agreeable, easygoing, and quiet about your needs isn't loving you. He's managing his comfort. It feels like connection in the beginning, but over time, you start to notice that the relationship only works when you're accommodating, when you bite your tongue, when you downplay what bothers you just to keep things good. But here's the hard truth. If someone's love disappears the moment you assert yourself, that was never love. It was control dressed as affection. In a healthy relationship, you can speak your mind without it becoming a fight. You can express a boundary without it turning into drama. You're allowed to take up space emotionally. But with someone who values control over connection, your voice becomes a threat. Your emotions become inconvenient. Your standards become too much. You're told you're overreacting, too sensitive, or never satisfied. And if you're not careful, you start to internalize it. You start to believe that your needs are a burden, that your feelings are unreasonable, that maybe if you were just more easygoing, things would be better. That's how emotional manipulation works. It's subtle, it's persistent, and it erodes your self-trust over time. When you love someone, you naturally want to be flexible. You want to make things work. But if the relationship only survives because you're the one constantly adjusting, constantly keeping the peace, constantly swallowing your truth just to avoid conflict, then what you have isn't mutual, it's one-sided. It's a performance. And what's dangerous about that dynamic is that it rewards you for staying small. The more you bend, the smoother things go. The more you suppress your truth, the more love you seem to receive. But it's conditional. The moment you stop being easy to manage, the moment you say, actually, that doesn't work for me, things shift. Suddenly, he's distant, dismissive, defensive. It's in that moment you see the real nature of the relationship, because someone who truly loves you doesn't punish you for having a voice. They don't withdraw affection just because you're no longer convenient. They don't need to manage you. They respect you. You become a partner, not a project. They understand that relationships come with challenge, with emotion, with growth. And they want to grow with you, not just keep you frozen in the version of you that served their ego. The truth is, your needs are not a threat. Your boundaries are not an inconvenience. If someone can only handle you when you're agreeable, that's not emotional safety, it's emotional control. And here's the most important part. You don't have to keep trying to be low-mentional to keep someone around. The right person will find your honesty refreshing, not overwhelming. They'll see your depth as a gift, not a complication. They won't flinch when you stand up for yourself. They'll lean in. So if someone is making you feel like love only exists when you're easy to manage, it's time to pause and ask yourself, is this love or just control in disguise? Because you were not put here to perform for someone else's comfort. You were not made to twist yourself into a quieter, simpler version just to be liked. You're here to be fully seen, fully heard, and fully loved. And that will never come from someone who only shows up when you're easy to control. There's a moment that comes in every relationship, especially the difficult ones, when you realize that trying to argue your way to peace just isn't worth it anymore. You start to see how every conversation turns into a fight, how standing up for yourself somehow becomes an attack, how expressing a simple boundary escalates into an emotional negotiation. It's exhausting. And the truth is, not every battle is worth fighting. Some people aren't looking for understanding, they're looking for control. Some people don't want resolution, they want dominance. And in those moments, the healthiest thing you can do isn't to yell louder or explain better. It's to stop engaging altogether. Peace doesn't come from winning an argument. It comes from choosing not to be pulled into one in the first place. That's a hard lesson, especially if you're someone who values clarity and emotional depth. You want to be understood. You want to fix things. You want to know that the person on the other side is trying as hard as you are. But sometimes they're not. Sometimes their ego is so fragile that they hear your truth as an insult. They twist your words, flip the blame, or shut down completely. And suddenly you're no longer having a conversation, you're defending your right to feel. That's when you need to walk away, not to punish them, not to play games, but to protect yourself from emotional erosion. Because arguing with someone who refuses to hear you is not strength, it's self-abandonment. You end up pouring your energy into someone else's denial, trying to pull emotional maturity out of someone who's not interested in growth. And all the while, your own peace slips further and further away. It's a powerful shift when you learn to say, I don't need to fight about this. I need to leave this dynamic. That doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you've chosen yourself. You've chosen your energy. You've chosen to stop bleeding emotionally for someone who's not even reaching for the bandages, because you can't fix what someone refuses to face. You can't build peace in a space that thrives on chaos. And if your inner calm threatens their control, they'll try to drag you into conflict just to feel powerful again. Refusing to engage isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It means you've learned that protecting your peace sometimes requires disappointing people who thrive on dysfunction. It means understanding that you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to be the emotional sponge for someone who keeps throwing their pain at you. You don't have to over-explain your standards to someone committed to misunderstanding them. When you choose peace over proving your point, something inside you heals. You stop living in reaction. You stop waiting for them to get it. You stop investing in battles that only ever leave you depleted. And most importantly, you reclaim your power, not by shouting, but by not showing up. The most disarming move you can make with someone who's trying to control you is to stop responding. When you no longer rise to the bait, they lose the hook. This isn't about silence as manipulation. It's silence as self-preservation. It's giving yourself permission to outgrow dysfunction, to walk away without needing to be right, to choose the quiet over the chaos. Not every battle deserves your presence. And the moment you realize that, you don't just protect your peace, you become it. One of the most freeing things you'll ever do is disappoint the wrong person. It sounds harsh at first, especially if you're someone who's spent a lot of your life trying to be good, to be liked, to avoid letting anyone down. But when you look a little closer, you realize something. Trying to keep people happy is often the very thing that's keeping you unhappy. You bend, you adjust, you suppress your instincts just to preserve someone's opinion of you. But the cost of their approval is your peace. And eventually, something inside you breaks. Or, if you're lucky, something inside you wakes up. When you finally decide to stop showing up for people who wouldn't do the same for you, you might disappoint them. When you stop over-explaining yourself, stop being emotionally available on demand, stop apologizing for having needs, you might make them uncomfortable. And when that happens, the wrong person will say you've changed, that you're distant, that you're difficult now. But what they're really saying is, you're no longer as easy to manipulate, and that's not your problem to solve. Disappointing the wrong person is often the beginning of finding the right version of yourself, the version who no longer says yes out of guilt, the version who no longer accepts crumbs and calls it care, the version who knows that protecting your energy is not selfish, it's essential. The wrong person will always make your boundaries feel like betrayal because they were never interested in your wholeness, only in your availability. And once you realize that, you stop chasing validation and start choosing alignment. Sometimes we think we're avoiding conflict when we keep giving in, when we keep showing up even though we're drained, when we keep trying to be understanding at the expense of our own standards. But that's not peace. That's just delayed chaos. Because resentment builds, your body starts to tighten, your soul starts to shrink, and before long, you're not even sure who you are without the constant effort to keep everything smooth. That's the real cost of trying to avoid disappointing someone. You disappoint yourself. The moment you finally say no, finally draw the line, finally walk away, you might hurt their ego, you might bruise their pride, but you're not doing it to them. You're doing it for you. You're choosing growth over guilt. You're choosing clarity over confusion. And yes, you're choosing peace over performance. The wrong person will make you feel guilty for growing. The right one will grow with you. What you start to see when you stop living in fear of disappointing others is that the right people don't ask you to abandon yourself. They don't punish you for evolving. They don't require you to be small so they can feel big. And the more you protect your peace, the more clearly you see who's really in your corner. Not just when you're convenient, but when you're honest, when you're standing in your power, and you're no longer making yourself easy just to be accepted. So don't fear the fallout. Don't fear the silence that comes when someone walks away because you stop making them comfortable. Let it happen. Because when you stop trying to impress the wrong people, you make room for the ones who love the real you. And that kind of love, it never asks you to choose between connection and self-respect. It thrives on both. There's this myth we're fed over and over again, that if you truly love someone, you'll do anything to keep them. You'll compromise endlessly. You'll stick around through anything. You'll sacrifice your own needs in the name of love. And while it sounds romantic, the reality is far more damaging than people realize. Because loving someone doesn't mean you have to lose yourself in the process. In fact, one of the most powerful truths you can hold on to is this: you can love someone and still love yourself more. That might sound selfish to someone who's used to being prioritized. It might sound cold to someone who benefited from your self-neglect. But it's not selfish, it's healthy. Because when you put your peace, your values, your emotional well-being first, you're not rejecting love. You're rejecting anything that asks you to compromise who you are to keep it. Real love doesn't demand that you shrink. It doesn't ask you to trade your sanity for someone else's comfort. Real love creates space for both people to be whole, not just one person to be dominant while the other stays small. You can care deeply for someone and still walk away. You can remember the good times and still know it's not enough. You can miss them and still choose yourself, because staying in a situation where your needs are always the second thought, where your boundaries are met with resistance, where your voice is constantly quieted, that's not love. That's self-abandonment, disguised as loyalty, and it's one of the fastest ways to lose your sense of self. When you start to really value your peace, you become less tolerant of relationships that run on potential instead of consistency. You stop clinging to people who only show up when it suits them. You stop romanticizing connection that comes with conditions, and instead you ask yourself a much more important question: do I feel safe, respected, and seen here? If the answer is no, then love alone is not enough to stay, because love without safety isn't intimacy, it's volatility. Love without respect isn't connection, it's imbalance. It's okay to love someone and still outgrow the dynamic you had with them. You can love their soul and still recognize that the relationship isn't healthy for you anymore. That doesn't make the love invalid. It makes you wise enough to know that love is not a reason to tolerate chaos. And choosing yourself doesn't erase the love that was there. It just means you're not willing to suffer in the name of it anymore. There comes a point when you realize that loving yourself more doesn't mean you love them any less. It means your standards have risen. It means your sense of worth has deepened. And it means that any version of love that comes at the cost of your mental and emotional stability isn't one you're willing to accept anymore. That shift is hard. It comes with grief. It comes with doubt. It comes with moments where you'll second-guess everything. But what it also brings is freedom, peace, strength, clarity. You can still care, you can still wish them well, but you don't have to choose them. You can love them from afar. You can remember the beauty of what was without reopening the wound of what is. And every time you choose yourself, every time you reinforce your peace, you're reminding yourself that you don't have to sacrifice who you are for the hope that someone else will change. Because loving someone doesn't mean you stop loving you. And sometimes the deepest love you can show for both of you is letting go. Peace isn't something you chase after the chaos ends. It's something you choose as the starting point. It's not the prize at the end of a relationship if you've done everything right. It's not something someone else gives you when they finally treat you better. Peace is the standard. It's the baseline you build your life on. And once you decide that, everything changes. You stop entertaining energy that doesn't match yours. You stop giving time to people who only bring confusion. And you stop waiting for someone else to create the calm you've always had the power to create for yourself. When peace becomes your standard, you no longer find drama exciting. You no longer mistake inconsistency for passion. You don't get pulled into the back and forth, the highs and lows, the games and the tests. That kind of emotional chaos might have once felt familiar, maybe even addictive, but now it feels draining, because you've learned that someone who really values you doesn't keep you guessing. They don't treat you like a backup plan, an emotional landing pad, or a source of validation when they're bored or lonely. They treat your peace as sacred because they know that to love you well is to respect your calm. The shift happens when you stop asking, will they like me if I do this? And start asking, does this protect my peace? Every decision becomes simpler. Do I respond to this message that feels manipulative? No, it costs my peace. Do I engage in this argument that's going nowhere? No, it drains me. Do I accept this apology with no changed behavior? No, because forgiveness without growth only resets the cycle. When peace is the standard, you stop compromising with chaos. Some people will call that cold. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're distant now, guarded, hard to reach. But what they're really saying is, you no longer let me access you on demand. You've stopped being emotionally available for people who only show up when it suits them, and that's not cruelty, it's self-awareness. You've stopped living in reaction to other people's moods, decisions, and confusion. You've stepped into your own clarity, and that clarity is often misread by people who can't meet you there. That's the thing about peace. It makes insecure people uncomfortable because peace isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's not attention-seeking. It's firm, quiet, steady. And some people only know how to connect through chaos. They'll try to poke at you, provoke you, pull you back into the mess, not because they want closeness, but because they miss the control. The moment you no longer rise to it, you become unfamiliar. You stop being a mirror for their drama. And that shift is powerful because now you're no longer available for emotional recycling, you're available for emotional growth. When peace is the starting point, not the reward, you set a tone for your entire life. It shapes how you date, how you communicate, how you show up for yourself. You're no longer negotiating your standards just to keep someone else comfortable. You're not here to win anyone over, you're here to stay in alignment. And if someone can't meet you there, you don't argue, you don't beg, you don't explain. You let them go with love and return to your calm. Your peace isn't something someone else should have the power to take from you. It's yours. It's your responsibility. It's your compass. And when you treat it like the standard, you stop settling for anything or anyone that threatens it. Because peace isn't just what you deserve at the end of the story. It's how you start writing a better one. At some point, you stop asking, will this make him upset? And start asking, does this protect my peace? Because peace isn't something you should have to earn by being agreeable, forgiving too fast, or making yourself small. It's not a reward for putting up with disrespect. It's the requirement for the life you want to live. And yes, sometimes choosing that peace will bruise someone's ego. Sometimes they'll say you've changed. They'll tell you you're too cold, too distant, too selfish now. But you're not selfish. You're awake. You're no longer willing to trade your sanity for a seat at a table where love came with conditions. Let them call it ego. Let them say you're hard to handle. The truth is, they were only comfortable when you weren't protecting yourself. So let them be uncomfortable. Because the real shift happens when you realize you don't need to prove your worth to someone who couldn't honor your peace. You don't need to keep the wrong people happy. You just need to keep showing up for yourself. Protect your peace, even if it disappoints them, even if it surprises them, even if it destroys their ego. Because anyone who sees your boundaries as a threat was never ready to meet the real you. And the real you? She's just getting started.